we've got a hybrid show for us today because Nicholas Phillips showed me everything he had and our plans changed. The idea was for this to be just a conversation for people to get to know Nicholas Phillips and what he's done with the state of Victoria, Australia, in terms of setting up their asset management accountability framework. Then we're gonna, and we're still gonna try to get some Victoria government executives to join us and talk about the value that they have received by instituting the asset management accountability framework. And then we were gonna have yet another edition where Nick rolled up his sleeves and really exposed the details of the Victoria asset management accountability framework. And we're still going to do all that, but this program is turning into a hybrid where he is going to talk with us, but he's going to show us the complexity of the background of the asset management framework that Victoria, Australia has. But before we get started with that, we'd like to thank our patron members: Jacobs, Mantech, Onuma, ABS Quality Evaluation, and CGI, and our organizational members, including Collectus and 26 Degree Software, who are at the National Facility Management Technology Conference in Baltimore, Maryland, and they're with our other member, Onuma Inc. Their program on Tuesday was standing room only. So the organizers asked them to come back and do an encore performance in a bigger hall. They're bringing asset management to associations and conferences together as a team. That's what we want to be doing as a network. And so it's really exciting to hear about their success together. And then April 3rd, next Thursday, we're having a new organizational member, Facile.ai, come and talk to us about their use of AI and web-based connections between HVAC assets to save dramatic amounts of money in a 6-week pilot. And then they set up a subscription. So if you want to keep saving money, then you can easily just continue. They have actually inspired us to create a new form of membership. Participants in the ALN pilot project network will be paired with owners who want to test out new asset management tools and processes. And I've got to get board approval on Monday to go ahead and open this up, but I think it's going to really make the asset leadership network become more dynamic, hands-on, showing people what's actually possible instead of talking about it in theory. And we'll still talk about it in theory, like we're talking about this Victoria, Australia asset management framework. And that's because they've got it down. Australia's ahead of us, and we can learn a lot from what they're doing in their country. So we're very happy to have Nick Phillips join us today. And Nick was one of the founders of the Asset Management Council in Australia. He worked with our colleagues Sally Nugent and Peter Kohler. And Nicholas has joined our Values and Benefits from Asset Management web program that we do with the AMC. Why don't you join us, Nick?
I'll do that, Mike.
And
good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. As people can see, there is no light coming in Nick's window. He got up at 6 o'clock in the morning to join us, and that's not an easy thing because it's winter in Australia, and getting up on a cold winter.
Not yet. It was just a start of fall.
It's
our
fall.
autumn.
Okay. But anyway, thank you for getting up early, Nick. I've really liked working with you, and we could spend an entire half hour on how you got where you're at in your asset management journey. But we like to ask people, how did you get where you're at in your asset management journey, to give us a little familiarity with you?
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. How did I get here? After a lot of years studying, I got a job as an engineer in the railways, as a maintenance planning engineer. I thought I'd better learn something about maintenance. And so from that, I undertook some postgraduate training in maintenance engineering. Um, that worked out. I got involved with the Asset Management Council. And look, it's a network of people, just like we are. I got talking, I got reacted too slowly at one of the AGMs and ended up being the chapter chair. As chapter chair, what do? You coordinate events and activities, and you talk and you link people together, and that in turn expands your knowledge and appreciation of things asset management. And so that's what happened. It just sort of bubbled away in the background, formed an interest. More to the point, though, it took me out of that that industry area that I was in, because you're looking for people to talk to a group of an audience, tap into their knowledge, their experiences from all sectors, from all segments of the market. And so that was a case then of connecting with people, and then from that you just build an understanding, build knowledge. So that led from a chapter chair to a national chair to a director, onto becoming the nominations committee chair, and then kind of backing out of all that, because there comes a time, after all, when let's make room for the next generation of leaders. And then along the way, stayed active.
Well,
So
thank you for
that's
that service to the overall asset management community. What kind of work were you doing while you were doing all that volunteer activity?
well, the work I was doing. Well, that all that is volunteer time.
Yeah,
Happens after hours and overnight. You've
yes.
still got a real job,
Mhm.
and that real job is around maintenance, production planning, um, recognizing that assets are at end of life, and building business cases for projects for augmentation and renewal, becoming um, start questioning practices, business process around the maintenance planning, and say things can be done better. And so you become the reliability engineer. As as you know, well, Nick, you seem to be pretty smart. How about you? You reckon you got the solutions? Become the reliability engineer. And so then again, you're doing work in understanding the modes of failure, the causes of failure, the processes that need to be strengthened, the relationships between people in the workshop and the way the asset performs or doesn't perform.
Mhm.
Um, what's the failure? Well, actually, it's got nothing to do with the the selection of the material. It's the supply chain, availability of spare parts. Are they the right ones? And so you get hold of that and you start questioning all those roles that contribute towards the success of the portfolio operating. And they go and say, Nick, well, the manager at the train maintenance depot has got to take some leave. Can you go there for a couple of weeks and keep the seat warm? Um, that's code for a couple of years or forever, generally.
All right, so you've got
So,
a great combination of visibility through your volunteer work, and you've got a depth of experience. And I imagine that combined to get you in position to get the ear of the Victorian government, and how did the asset management framework, accountability framework come about?
Well, it got me into the ear of the government by association with people, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that luxury of, look, you've got to learn how to work with people. And look, I had I worked with one person, we could not work together. It was just banging heads. Now, however, that person went one way and I went another way. I went back to my consulting specialist services practice, which I got into in 2001. So I've been the owner of a boutique management advisory services group for the last 24 years now, coming up to 25 years. So we couldn't work together, but at the same time, this other person went into a government role in looking overseeing the asset portfolio of a significant entity. It was the Department of Transport for Victoria. So the asset portfolio is $105 billion worth of value, but it's the passenger train network, it's the regional train network and infrastructure, it's the suburban light rail system, and it's the roads authority. So a significant, it's critical assets.
Yes.
It's complex because people are involved. And along came the government's requirement for asset management. In fact, what I might do is just open up this slideshow.
Yeah, it's
Right?
a perfect time to go to the slides. And like I said, while you're opening that, I'll explain again that this is going to be hybrid. We usually just have discussion, but Nicholas has some great slides.
So could I just confirm that we've got the discussion outline?
Yes, that's what I'm seeing.
Terrific.
Yep.
So, so I'll come back to the discussion outline.
Yeah.
Asset management in our jurisdiction. Back in the 90s, mid 90s, there was a series of documents called the Asset Management Series. They provided those that were the facility managers and the asset managers in the public sector with guidelines and suggestions around good practice. It was revised, upgraded, updated and was re-released as Sustaining Our Assets in the year 2000. Then along came the global financial crisis around 2009-10. Australia, at the federal level, made a significant investment in upgrades of our educational assets, school buildings, gymnasiums, sports fields, whatever was ready to go for investment, the federal government made funds available for. And it then meant that 2 years later, all those agencies amended their budgets. Where did the budgets go? The budget submission went to the state government. The state government turned around and said, well, that's not funded. And so what had happened, what the backstory is that Sustaining Our Assets, a good practice guideline for the practice of asset management, the Asset Management Accountability Framework released in 2016, well, rather it's be read as Sustaining Our Assets updated. All the Department of Treasury and Finance did was found where what good practice statements were and annotated the accountable officer must undertake an assessment of, must establish an organisational environment, must review the maintenance practices, but must ensure that projects occur when the industry is hungry and got an appetite for them. And so what that meant was that, and the accountability framework the author or the issuing authority was the Department of Treasury and Finance. Where do you think that went to in all the agencies? It
Yeah.
went from the chief financial officer, it went from Department of Treasury and Finance, accounting, finance centric, and it was promulgated to the chief financial officers of all the agencies. So, what's the outcome there? So, where we've got this environment of asset managers, facility managers being non-technical, technical engineering, all of a sudden have a new partner in their sandpit. It's called the finance group. So now we've just expanded the interests in asset management, and more to the point, it was no longer finding maintenance engineering in your process document and doing a word replace with asset management, because maintenance engineering just doesn't fit the finance world. It doesn't fit some other environments. And so we've got this situation now where a mindset has to develop. And so that's been the really interesting thing. Now, it's simply to say that we've updated a guideline document that's become a policy statement in turn, because it's embedded with the accountable officer must. So there's all these leadership and governance aspects that need to be checked off within an agency, and there is the life cycle of planning, of concept development, planning, implementation, capability,
Well,
review.
you lay that out in your outline. So why don't we look at that now?
Let's go back up. So that was the evolution of the account of the framework. What happened though with the evolution of the framework was that subsequently, a couple of months later, the Financial Management Act, a regulation associated with that, was updated for the standing directions of the Minister for Finance, and that gave teeth to the accountability framework. And so now it was mandated. And what that did was anchored the requirement for the responsible body, the agency, to publicly report their compliance with the standing direction requirements. Standing direction 4.2.3, you get to know these off the heart.
Chapter and verse.
Very much so. It dealt with asset management, but the public reporting, the attestation, says that we comply with the standing directions, the requirements of the Act, the Financial Management Act. But also that where with any of the standing directions where you are materiality or non-compliance, you need to assess whether it was material or non-material, and if it was material, rather if both, particularly where it was material, also went into the annual report. And so it brought the issues that needed to be addressed out into the open. So the process is transparent. That's the background to the accountability framework. But look, simply putting in black and white, putting it on paper and issuing it, and in the language of government, well, there's quite a lot of interpretation that needs to be made. That's where I got involved. The person I talked about, the one we couldn't work together. But we both respected each other, of course. All of a sudden, I got the phone call, Nick, are you available? Need some help with developing this. We need to prepare ourselves for the attestation. And so I got involved with a couple of departments. The department was the super department. Mike, you've been involved with the public sector there.
Yes.
An agency has quickly how many ministers,
Lots.
politicians? But generally, you got one politician that sits at the, you know, got the lead of that department.
Yes.
This department had 9 ministers
Oh my goodness.
provide. So here we've got 9 ministers, one for transport, one for roads, one for ports and harbours, and another one for sports and recreation, one for the arts, one for investment. And so all of a sudden we see that there's this diversities of ministers and interest in the portfolios. And the portfolio has got hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets. They've got infrastructure, land, waterways,
Let me
harbours.
guess. You needed a roadmap.
Now, look, not only do you need a roadmap, but you've got to have the ability to talk to, you've got to talk 15 languages.
Yeah.
Apparently it's all in English, but it's different because some of the leads are counting types, some of them are architects, some of them are project managers, some of them are engineers, some of them are tradies that skilled technicians that have come up off the floor.
Mhm.
It's got a bit of everything, and at the same time we're trying to create a roadmap that gives us a view of where the requirements are, what's the policy, how are we going to undertake the strategic planning, what's the implementation timelines, how are we going to check that it's all okay, and how are we going to meet our deadlines? Because look, it sounds easy, we talk about it nice and comfortably, but it takes, you got to herd cats in all of this,
Yes.
because people are saying, well, what's it got to do with me? And that's another story in itself. So the roadmap talks about the requirements,
Can you
identify the
show
requirements.
what's behind the words here?
I can. So what I might do is do this one and enlarge it so we can just move around the screen. So we've got our swim lane plan here. We talk about what's the requirements, and that feeds into defining requirements and standards by the asset strategy team in the bureaucracy.
Mhm.
That we've got to ask the question, do our current practices, we've got current practices, we've got required processes and practices. So is there a gap between them? So how to improve them? We set as at the agency level what the requirements are, which then feeds the requirements for the asset portfolios. And so as I just talked about in this one agency, there was public transport, and there is trains, heavy rail, there is light rail, the tram network, and there is the bus network. So all of a sudden we've got our 3 transport modes, 3 asset portfolios. We've got our ports and harbours, we've got our road network. And then we move into the other sectors, the art gallery, the library, the entertainment centres, the cultural and heritage properties that are being used for community activities. And so we've got this diversity of requirements, and we've got to understand in turn how their practices are adequate or not. But then what
So
we
you
do,
go from maintenance engineering to maintaining a large, complex state agency.
well, my challenge was really getting them on the page.
Okay.
Uh,
Herding the cat.
I don't get involved in what they do. Well, I certainly start to give them the skills or the knowledge of how to do it, what processes to apply, what's the tools that you have available. We have a catch here. So who's familiar, whether it's a show of hands or just acknowledgement, that who does some failure mode effects analysis?
I can raise everyone's hands for them.
Okay,
It's
who gets
unanimous.
involved?
They're all aware of
Yeah.
that.
So I ask the same question, and you draw a response. Now, what's that? So then you ask who gets involved in the corporate risk workshop. What does a risk workshop do?
Yeah.
And looks at a failure mode. What's the effect if it occurs, and what's the action we take to restore? So I've just described a failure mode effects analysis. And so we've got systems and processes in the organisation that addresses a requirement. So you're doing it because we do so much of this stuff that we've got to look at what is the language. We've got to do a translation of language,
Yes.
because my role was that we've got this asset portfolio that's been around delivering services for more than just the last 6 months. We're a modern community. These assets have been on the ground for over 100 years. And on the face of it, we're delivering services. So we draw from that, but we've got a subconscious, an embedded adequate level of competence. So
Yes.
let's understand what we all do. More to the point, it's saying that we've got competence across the organisation, and asset management is a shared accountability model.
Yes. And I don't want people to think that we're going to go into detail on this. I wanted people to get an overview of this. And then there's
So
a couple of other slides that are similarly, you're going to just give an overview of. We're going to do another program with you that goes into more detail. And we're approaching the bottom of the hour. And if anybody hasn't guessed by yet, we're going overtime. We're going past the 30-minute mark, probably to 45 minutes.
So let's just kill this one off and go back to where we were. So what we've got in this roadmap is, now we develop what the requirements are, we evaluate, we establish the practices that we've got, and we start the improvement programs. We communicate with the audit committees, the responsible officer, like the manager, the leads of all the controlled entities, the asset portfolios, to get us all on the same page, bring us to up to date, reacting. We're keeping the executive management informed. We're checking that we've got an objective. So we're checking all the time that we're aligning ourselves, heading towards the objective. So we're not getting off track. That's an important feature. What we do is that we have some review and evaluation activities. So it's an assurance piece, because ultimately all of this comes together, goes into an assurance report, the attestation report, that says we're doing okay, or we've got to improve in this space.
So let's
And
look
that
at that,
allows,
the framework that allows people to validate that they are doing what they're supposed to be doing.
well, what we've got there is, if I just pull up this one, that framework means that we prepare the consolidated attestation report. We have a review and evaluation mechanism, so it's validated, it's endorsed, prepared for recommendation, and it then flows to, so an agency has a board of management, but it's the accountable officer, the CEO. That's the person who's held to account for the allocation of the resources of the organisation. So they've got to approve this. They sign off the annual report.
Yes.
And for the asset management piece, it then feeds into the finance group or the governance and compliance team that are compiling all the attestations from the standard directions that
Mhm.
then, as a result, they go into the annual report. And the
But
annual report,
let's look at that. Let's look at your slides about the framework.
Reg, this, okay, but if we go, I can go back, I won't go back, but after the roadmap, we needed to start to outline what people needed to do to illustrate their compliance with the requirements or their maturity on their journey of asset management. We've
Mhm.
prepared, rather, it's not a we, this is where I've taken the requirements and put them into a template. So let's have a look at that template.
Yes.
Have I moved the spreadsheet onto the page? Is it there to see?
I'm seeing the asset management accountability framework self-assessment tool. And I don't want people to freak out that they can't see it. We're just giving an overview of the fact that this tool exists and people are using it. We're going to do another full hour program with Nick in the future where we go into detail.
So
But
what we've got, what I've prepared is, look, I like to say a simple spreadsheet. They're not simple. But you've got links and relationships all over the place. The core with this is that we state what the requirement is. The accountable officer must apply the mandatory requirements. They must ensure that asset management functions are established. They're the requirements. And then out of those requirements, we say, well, what does, what does the evidence look like? So, do we need to do this? What's my asset? What's my threshold of my assets that get it into the fixed asset register? So, I've got assets. Have I got lots of them? Yes, I have. What's the level of criticality that they contribute to service delivery? So we've got records. And then what's the evidence? That you reviewed the fixed asset register. Right? You know that it exists. And so all of a sudden I'm now as an asset manager talking to finance, that's where the asset register, fixed asset register lives. How do I find this? We provide some guidance, some suggestions of what the evidence might look like. And then, of course, we need to say, have I viewed the artifacts? Have I created the artifacts? Have the artifacts been reviewed as required? And so we summarise that. And then we look for the requirements that's spelled out here. I then need to make a call, have the process, the evidence, the artifacts, do they satisfy the mandatory requirement? And I add into I then score it. I say, yep, I've got the artifact that's adequate, or I need to develop it. I've got no idea. I then say, how well is that artifact being understood or applied? And get the same level. So what I'm doing is that I'm looking at the definitions that come up. I'm completing the table with our level of application of a process and how the process is being applied, the feedback mechanisms, what value am I getting out of it? And it feeds into populating a summary chart. So we can see at a view, at a glance, how we're tracking, how we're performing. One of the areas that we need to be really careful of here is that it is a tool that kind of implies that every asset portfolio is the same criticality, same complexity. They're not. But everything comes with a radar chart that's the same size. So we've got to be very careful about the message that we give with that. So if I close that, so what we've done is, of course, said that we've got an assessment tool. Great. But what does that mean? I'm talking to somebody that's an accountant, asking about must assess, evaluate the maintenance resources. So when I send that to the technical group and ask them to assess the maintenance resources, what do I think happens? Because I get told whether the maintenance is any good or not. And I actually want to know, have I got the appropriate adequate resources to deliver a functioning, performing asset portfolio? And so all of a sudden, I share my tool with the procurement function of the organisation, the finance function. And I say, could you respond to this requirement, please? And what do I get? Nothing to do with us. So now we've got to do some training.
Yes.
Because we're talking about the resources for maintenance. We're talking about, have I got enough funds? Is it budgeted? Have I got a supply chain? Now, these are accountabilities of another function. And so they are captured by.
So, Nick, if we can stop right there for a second, I think that encapsulates the evolution from managing assets to the bigger picture asset management perfectly.
Yep. So then what I've done is develop the roadmap to add an assessment tool, linked a training package that goes with the assessment tool. What do these things mean? And finally, with the implementation support, then started to build the family portfolio of complementary tools, guidelines, process flowcharts, training, workshop, mentoring, providing mentoring support. And what I've done ever since 2018-19 is continued to stay active in the public sector agencies, providing mentoring, coaching, specialist training around asset management fundamentals, and that's been ongoing. In fact, there was a 2-hour session yesterday with the Department of Jobs, Skills, Industry and Regions. Nothing to do with public transport, of course, but they're building their capability with asset management. They've got a tertiary teaching community as part of their group. They've got sports and recreation for your GP fanatics of the audience. Melbourne had the GP, the Formula One last weekend. One of the agencies is the coordinating, facilitating agency for the Grand Prix. So they're involved. So we've got asset management activities. We're building their capability to deliver a really good entertainment event once a year and being adequately funded, have the resources, looking after the asset portfolio.
Excellent. Why don't you stop sharing your slides? We're going to go into the more detail in the future and talk a little bit more about some of the anecdotal evidence of its success. So you just said that the asset management accountability framework is helpful in securing revenue generating entertainment by assuring that the roads are appropriate for the use, which is very different for Grand Prix. What are some of the other anecdotal evidences that you can share about the success of the asset management accountability framework?
Well, the other successes is that the state government the bureaucracy, their ministers change. And so they change the makeup of their portfolios, sort of machinery government. And so the department, that super department, was consequently broken into 3 departments, and branches within it were moved into others.
Hmm.
What's the overall significance of that? Well, not a lot really, I guess, but you've got to pick up your asset portfolio. You've got to move it from one fixed asset register into another one. And so we've been through these couple of years of asset management, capability uplift, understanding our asset portfolio, understanding what we do. And it's been much more streamlined to pick up a branch, a team, and just lift it up and move it over and drop it. Sure, some of the reporting requirements and expectations are different from group to group, manager to manager, and they've got to make some adjustments. But that dilemma of fitting assets into a new fixed asset register has been much more efficient, much smoother, because there's a common approach, or
Yeah.
increasingly common approaches. The
So,
other one that's happening, well, of course, we've been through what? Um, Look, there's nothing like a good pandemic, is there?
you Australians have a sick sense of humor. Okay, but I'm
Um,
laughing. I'm laughing.
there's nothing. What's happened is that all jurisdictions have made investments into their, the people to keep us protected. We've had isolation tactics, we've had rules and regulations, we've consumed unbudgeted funds, which is, what does that cause? It causes a deficit. And then we get out of all of that and we've got to recover.
Yeah.
We've got to pay back the borrowings. And so now we've got an environment of tightening of the funds available to deliver services. What's happened is that the people have got a better understanding developed. They've got systems. They've got their life cycle cost models. They know what they need to spend on the asset. We've increasingly we're adding a defensible environment around, I've got this asset portfolio that's got to achieve this level of service, and we have to do these things to it, which requires this level of funding.
Mm-hmm.
And they better appreciate where what can be turned off, where they can take, and they have better understanding of the risk management, so that we're not, yeah, in this session workshop yesterday, working group, yeah, not enough funds came up, but they weren't stressed like it was the same scenario pre-COVID.
Okay. Well, from an asset leadership network point of view, that thing that you described about agencies and portfolios being picked up and moved over is asset leadership. And the fact that there has been a culture of asset management established along, the asset management accountability framework helps establish that consistency so that you can make those types of moves, and the people not freaking out when they're facing, not enough funds to do the work that's needed. They can start thinking smarter, and that is a huge success. And I would say that Australia is 15, 20 years ahead of the US. Although our Department of Transportation with our MAP 21 has started teaching people about asset management plans. There is some overlap.
Yeah. There is. And look, there's so much of this that we do. What we've got now is that we know, we start to understand, who am I going to nail? Because as an organisation, we start talking about service delivery criticality. what's important to, we narrow down the things that we must do.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and changing the subject just ever so slightly, I've added into the chat just some contacts. I had to fix up your contact details, Mike.
Oh, use these newer ones, not the older
Yeah,
ones that I was using.
that's
Well,
right.
thank you for correcting that. And thank you for your time early this morning to
That's
give
right.
us this overview of the uh, Victoria, Australia Asset Management Accountability Framework. I'm looking forward to coordinating with some of your local government executives to have another program. It will not be at Thursday at 3. We're not going to make the government executives get up at 6 a.m. We save that for our special friends.
Thanks. Look, Mike, let's make that the step. Yeah, you haven't got me up early. What you've done is you've stopped me from going for a ride on a bike with a couple of friends.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for taking out of your health accountability framework to share with us about this really robust asset management accountability framework that is available for free. But like I said, we're going to have a couple more programs to help people get more familiar with this, and maybe people here in the States or other parts of the world will see the value of it. Matter of fact, other states in Australia might want to look into that. So
They are. New South Wales, uh, joining state, it's adopted a framework. They call it, it's their asset management policy,
mhm,
and you know, and it's also been mandated. It's got regulation
mhm,
requirements sitting behind it. All the states have got their guidelines, good practice guidelines. Victoria and New South Wales have mandated requirements.
okay.
And of course, the other states, they'll be watching um, and making their call as to what is the nature of the mandating or putting asset management in the spotlight.
Mhm.
Because what's happening is Australia, the population is growing. Hence, the demand for the effectiveness of the asset portfolio is increasing.
Yes.
The demographics, we've got a scenario where there's an increasing component of population that are beyond the workforce that have retired.
Yeah.
What, what does that mean simplistically? That the rates revenue that's generated on a per capita basis is going to be less.
Yeah.
So there's even more pressure on the asset managers
Well,
to reach.
the services go up because of the aging population.
Well, person by person, they're the same. But with the aging population, but road network, comms, water and wastewater, all the same. But the revenue you get from your taxes and your rates is on a per capita is going down. And so then you've got to work out how to apply the funds and the resources in a more competitive environment to maintain the same levels of service.
Now you're talking real asset leadership, and we're at that asset leadership level. And so thank you, Nick, for giving us an opportunity to understand how.
Yep.
Oh, I gotta stop sharing. I don't understand. This is why I need our Nick, our technical director, who was not, he got sick, so he wasn't able to join us. I can't do two things at once. So instead of showing the slides that says thank you to Nicholas Phillips for taking time this morning to expose us to the asset management accountability framework. And thank you to our patron sponsors and all of our sponsors. And next week is going to be a very interesting presentation. And then Nick and I are going to work on what dates we can get the State of Victoria government officials to speak, and it'll probably be like 4 or maybe even 5 o'clock Eastern time, because that gets into a better time in the morning in Australia. But keep an eye on our newsletter, and thanks. Have a great rest of your day, Nick, and really appreciate you taking time to talk with us.
Thanks, Mike. And for anyone with the content, drop an email if there's any comment or question as you've got, and we'll get back to you.
That's very nice of you. Thank you. And thanks to all the attendees.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Bye for now.
Afternoon.